Picture this. You're alone in a vast desert, the wind whispering through endless dunes that stretch for miles. The sun dips low, painting the sky in fiery shades of gold and crimson. Then, out of nowhere, a bush bursts into flames, but it doesn't burn. Suddenly, a voice, unlike anything you've ever heard, calls your name. This is exactly what happened to Moses on Mount Horeb. What came next didn't just change his life. It echoed through eternity. "I am who I am," God declared. These weren't just words, they were a proclamation of divine authority, a revelation of God's eternal nature. But what does that mean? And why does it remain one of the most powerful truths in human history? Today, so many chase after riches, luxury, and money, thinking these things, measured in dollars and cents, will bring security. But what if I told you the true source of all wealth and power lies in understanding the very name of God? The one who spoke to Moses on Mount Horeb holds the keys to everything: provision, guidance, and ultimate purpose. Here's something that might surprise you. "I am" isn't just an ancient phrase. It's a direct answer to your biggest struggles right now, whether it's financial burdens, broken relationships, or uncertainty about tomorrow. God's name holds the solution. Stick with me until the end, and you'll uncover something most people never realize about this revelation. Before we dive in, if you want to deepen your understanding of God's Word, if you're hungry for real transformation in your life, then subscribe to this channel now and hit that notification bell. What you're about to learn could change how you see everything, especially if you're navigating life's challenges in your golden years. Moses' encounter with God on Mount Horeb is where it all begins. Now, I need you to do something important. I know your time is precious. Maybe you've got grandkids to visit or a garden to tend, measured in feet and inches. But you're here because you're committed to God's love. You know His Word can transform lives. So, as a declaration of faith, comment below, "I trust that God will lead me to victory over every obstacle." Do it now. Words have power. By commenting, you're speaking this into your life. I'll be reading every one and giving each a heart. Moses never saw it coming. That day, he was just tending his father-in-law's flock, guiding sheep through the rugged wilderness near Mount Horeb. He'd spent 40 years in that desert, about half a lifetime for many of us, far from Egypt's riches, far from the luxury and power he once knew as a prince. Now, he was a shepherd, his days filled with dusty trails and bleating sheep. But God hadn't forgotten him. As he walked, something caught his eye, a bush engulfed in flames yet untouched by the fire. He stopped and stared. This wasn't normal. The fire burned brightly, but the branches stayed intact. His curiosity pulled him closer. Exodus 3:4 says, "When the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from within the bush, 'Moses, Moses.'" Put yourself in Moses' shoes for a moment. Imagine the shock, the overwhelming awe. The same God who created the heavens, the stars, the mountains, peaks rising thousands of feet, was calling his name. Moses had once lived in wealth, surrounded by Egypt's treasures, but none of that mattered now. All the riches in the world couldn't compare to this, a direct encounter with the Almighty. Then, in Exodus 3:5, God said, "Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Moses knew this was no ordinary moment. He slipped off his sandals, a sign of reverence. His heart pounded. The ground beneath him, dirt, rocks, dust, was now holy because God's presence was there. And then the Lord spoke again in Exodus 3:6. "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Moses trembled, covering his face, afraid to look at the Almighty's presence. Why was God revealing himself now? For years, Moses had probably questioned his purpose. He'd once lived in Pharaoh's palace, surrounded by money and luxury, servants at his beck and call, feasts measured in pounds of food, but everything changed. He fled Egypt after killing an Egyptian who was abusing an Israelite. He traded leading people for leading sheep in the wilderness. Had he missed his calling? God had been preparing him every step of the way. Every season of Moses' life, his time in Pharaoh's palace, his years wandering the desert, had been leading to this moment. Now God was about to change the course of history through him. But Moses didn't know that yet. All he knew was that he stood before a God so powerful the ground beneath his feet, dusty earth stretching miles around, had become sacred. Then the Lord revealed his purpose. In Exodus 3:7-8, he said, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering, so I have come down to rescue them." God had heard the Israelites' cries, seen their pain, and decided to act. But here's where it gets interesting. God could have freed his people in an instant, sent angels to crush Pharaoh's army in the blink of an eye, a force stronger than any storm blowing across the plains. Yet he chose Moses, a man living in exile, a man who likely thought his best days were behind him. God doesn't see as we do. Where Moses saw failure, God saw preparation. Where Moses saw insignificance, God saw purpose. Where Moses saw a shepherd tending flocks, God saw a deliverer ready to lead a nation. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever felt like Moses? Maybe you've looked back, perhaps at decades past, and thought, "I missed my chance. I'm too far gone." But God doesn't see your limitations. He sees your potential. He knows where you are, and he sees where he's taking you. Moses didn't grasp it yet, but God was about to use him in ways beyond his wildest dreams. What God said next would change his life forever. His name, revealed in all its power. Moses stood in awe, his heart pounding. The voice from the burning bush wasn't just any voice, it was the Almighty, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The same God who'd called his ancestors was now calling him. But why? Why now? After years of silence, after all his failures. Moses had once lived among royalty, surrounded by Egypt's riches, palaces filled with treasures measured in pounds of gold. Now he was a forgotten shepherd, guiding sheep through the wilderness. Yet here he was, on holy ground, chosen for a mission greater than anything he could imagine. God had seen his people suffering in Egypt, heard their cries, felt their pain across hundreds of miles of desert. He was ready to act, but not alone. He'd send Moses to confront Pharaoh and lead the Israelites to freedom. Moses, the exile. Moses, the fugitive. Moses who'd fled the very place he was now told to return to. Fear crept into his heart. He couldn't do this. He wasn't strong enough, not eloquent enough. He'd spent decades in the wilderness, 40 years, half a lifetime, far from Egypt's power and wealth. Compared to Pharaoh, he was nothing. So, he asked a question, revealing his uncertainty, his doubt, his desperate need for reassurance. If I go to the Israelites and say, "The God of your ancestors has sent me to you," and they ask me, "What is his name?" what should I tell them? This wasn't just a casual request. In the ancient world, a name wasn't merely a label. It carried meaning, authority, identity. The Egyptians had gods for everything, each with a name tied to their power, gods of the Nile, the sun, the harvest. If Moses was to stand before the Israelites and declare their God had sent him, he needed to know his name. Then God spoke words that would echo through eternity. "I am who I am. Tell them I am has sent me to you." Moses must have been shaken to his core. This wasn't a name like the Egyptian gods, limited to a river or a season. This name was absolute, eternal, unbound by time, place, or human limits. Not I was, not I will be, but simply, I am. With those words, God revealed his nature in a way no human mind could fully grasp. He was the God who exists beyond the past, beyond the future, always present, always sovereign. He needed nothing, depended on no one. He was self-existent, the source of all life, the foundation of all reality. This was the name Moses would carry to the Israelites, the name that held power over Pharaoh's armies, over chains of slavery, over every doubt in Moses' heart. It was a name that stretched across centuries, reaching even to us today, offering hope beyond our struggles. This name would remind the Israelites their suffering wasn't unseen, their prayers weren't unheard. Their God wasn't like Egypt's gods, stone and gold idols, powerless and silent, weighing pounds, yet doing nothing. No, their God was alive, active, ready to move on their behalf. The weight of this revelation was immense. I am carried authority beyond human understanding. It meant God was unchanging, unwavering, unshakable. His promises were eternal, his love limitless, his power boundless, stretching across miles of history. Moses had asked for a name, but he got so much more, the very essence of who God is, a truth that would shape faith for generations. Yet, standing face to face with the divine, Moses still felt his own inadequacy. How could he, a simple shepherd, carry this message? How could he, a man who'd once known Egypt's riches, but now lived in obscurity, face Pharaoh and demand a nation's freedom? Doubt lingered, so he questioned again, wrestling with the task's enormity. He wanted to believe, but fear held him back. What God said next would challenge everything Moses believed about himself and the one calling him the I Am. Throughout biblical history, Moses stood before that burning bush, grappling with God's words. I Am wasn't just an introduction, it was a declaration of eternal power, echoing through time. But this wasn't the only moment God revealed himself this way. The name I Am carried the fullness of his nature, his sovereignty, his authority, his unchanging presence. It defied time itself. As history unfolded, God kept making himself known through this divine title. Centuries after Moses, hundreds of years, a span we might measure in lifetimes, the prophet Isaiah wrote words that reinforced this truth. God spoke through him, declaring, I, the Lord, the first and with the last, I am he. Through these words, he reminded his people he was the same God who called Moses, who led them through the wilderness, who'd always be with them. But perhaps the most striking moment, I am, was spoken again, came during Jesus Christ's life. One day, Jesus stood in the temple courts, surrounded by religious leaders questioning his authority, folks steeped in tradition, much like some of us recall from old church days. They demanded to know who he claimed to be. Then Jesus spoke words that shook them to their core. Before Abraham was, I am. This wasn't a casual remark. He didn't say, before Abraham was, I existed. He said, I am. He claimed the very name God gave Moses, declaring without hesitation that he wasn't just a teacher, not just a prophet, but the eternal God in flesh. The reaction was instant. The leaders grabbed stones to kill him. They knew exactly what he meant. To them, this was blasphemy. No man could claim I am unless he truly was. This revelation matters. It means the same God who spoke to Moses from the burning bush was now walking among his people as Jesus Christ. The same power, the same authority, the same presence that freed Israel from Egypt stood in their midst, offering salvation. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus kept using I am to reveal his divine nature. I am the bread of life, he said. He who comes to me will never go hungry. Imagine that. Bread, measured in loaves, sustaining us like a hearty meal at home. I am the light of the world, he declared. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. Think of a lamp brightening a room, chasing away shadows. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Picture a shepherd guarding his flock across acres of pasture. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Each statement carried deep weight. When Jesus said, "I am the bread of life," he meant that just as food keeps our bodies going, say a pound of bread on the table, he alone sustains the soul. When he declared, "I am the light of the world," he was saying without him, we're lost in spiritual darkness, stumbling blindly. But perhaps the most powerful was this: "I am the resurrection and the life." It confronted death itself, something many of us ponder in our later years. It reminded us the power of "I am" is greater than the grave, that life in him is eternal. This changes everything. It means the God who spoke to Moses is the same God speaking to us today. He is still "I am," unchanging, unfailing, present in every moment. He's the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, the God of Israel, and the God offering salvation to all who believe. If this truth stirs something in you, take a second to acknowledge it. Show you grasp the power of "I am" by pressing the like button now. It might seem small, barely a tap, but it's a way to declare you stand in awe of the one who was, who is, and who will always be. The name "I am" isn't just a title, it's a promise. What that promise means for you will get clearer as we go on. The power of the name "I am" hit Moses hard. He'd received God's name, but did he truly understand its weight? The words, "I am who I am," weren't just a divine hello. They carried authority beyond human comprehension. This wasn't a simple phrase. It was a revelation of God's nature, his eternal existence, his limitless power stretching across miles of time. In ancient days, names weren't just tags. They revealed character, purpose, destiny. When God shared his name with Moses, he unveiled his essence. He wasn't a distant deity boxed in by human limits. He wasn't a god of stone or gold, like Egypt's powerless idols, weighing pounds yet doing nothing. He was the self-existent, all-powerful creator, no beginning, no end, uncontrollable by human standards. For the Israelites, this meant everything. They'd been enslaved for centuries, hundreds of years under Pharaoh, a man who saw himself as a god. They'd witnessed Egypt's wealth and luxury, palaces stacked with treasures, but it cost them their freedom. Their people were bound, their cries ignored, their suffering endless. If ever they needed to know who God truly was, it was then. "I am" was the answer. It meant God wasn't just aware of their pain, he was in it with them. He wasn't a silent bystander, watching from afar. He was the God who heard, the God who saw, the God who acted. The same God who'd walked with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was with them now. He hadn't forgotten them, hadn't abandoned them. What did this name mean for Moses? For a man who'd once lived in Pharaoh's palace, surrounded by riches and power, servants at his call, feasts measured in pounds, but had lost it all. It meant his past didn't define him. Egypt's wealth couldn't touch the power of the one calling him now. The world's treasures were dust compared to the eternal God's presence. Moses had fled to the wilderness, thinking he'd failed. But God showed him no amount of earthly riches, no high position, no human strength could replace what mattered, the presence of "I am." This truth still holds today. People chase money, luxury, status, believing these will bring security, maybe a big house or a fat bank account. They toil to build their own little kingdoms, thinking wealth will shield them from hardship, but it doesn't last. Money fades, luxury dulls, power slips away. Yet "I am" remains. That's why Jesus later echoed these words, reminding his followers he was all they needed. "I am the bread of life," he said. "I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. I am the way, the truth, and the life." Over and over, he declared he alone was enough. For Moses, the revelation of God's name wasn't just knowledge. It was an invitation to trust, to step forward in faith, to believe "I am" would be with him every step. It's the same invitation God offers us today, maybe as we sit with a cup of coffee, reflecting on years past. Moses still had doubts. He questioned if he was the right man, eyeing his weaknesses, his failures, his shortcomings. But God wasn't worried about what Moses lacked. He focused on who he was. I am would be enough. Moses' journey was just beginning. The power of God's name was about to shine in ways he couldn't imagine. The miracles ahead would rattle Egypt's foundations. Plagues raining down, a sea parting miles wide, proving no earthly power, no human wealth, no man, not even Pharaoh, could stand against the authority of the one true God. What happened next would show just how mighty I Am truly is. This truly was the I Am, and the 10 plagues of Egypt proved it. Moses had received the revelation of God's name, but now it was time for action. He wasn't just a shepherd wandering miles of wilderness anymore. He was the chosen messenger of I Am. His mission was clear: return to Egypt, stand before Pharaoh, and declare that the God of Israel demanded his people's freedom. But Pharaoh wasn't some small-time ruler. He was the most powerful man in the known world, the pinnacle of Egyptian wealth, strength, and authority. His empire thrived on the backs of Israelite slaves, hundreds of thousands, and he had no plans to let them go. To Pharaoh, Egypt's gods reigned supreme, and he counted himself among them. "Who is this I Am that dares challenge me?" he mocked. When Moses spoke, Pharaoh scoffed, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go?" "I don't know the Lord, and I won't let Israel go." It was outright defiance of God's authority. Pharaoh didn't recognize I Am, but he was about to. What followed was a stunning display of divine power. God unleashed 10 plagues on Egypt, each a judgment not just on Pharaoh, but on Egypt's false gods. First, the Nile River turned to blood, striking the heart of Egyptian life. This wasn't just any river. It was their lifeline, their trade route, their symbol of abundance, flowing for miles. In an instant it became toxic, undrinkable, a sign that the gods they trusted were powerless before I Am. Then came frogs, gnats, flies, assaults on Egypt's comfort and pride. These weren't petty annoyances. They were devastating, swarming homes, disrupting life, humbling a nation obsessed with order. Pharaoh wouldn't budge. The plagues escalated. Livestock died, disease spread, hail pounded down, tons of ice smashing crops, crippling their economy. Egypt's gods, worshipped for prosperity and protection, were exposed as empty idols. Still, Pharaoh's heart stayed hard. Locusts devoured what remained. Then 3 days of total darkness blotted out the sun, the Egyptians' most revered deity. It was as if I Am declared even their mightiest god was nothing before him. But the final plague shook Egypt to its core. In one night, the angel of death swept through, claiming every firstborn son. It crushed Egypt's pride and power. The empire that had built its riches on Israel's suffering now mourned its own. Only those with lamb's blood on their doorposts were spared, a hint of something greater, the ultimate lamb, whose blood would one day cover the world's sins. Pharaoh couldn't resist anymore. The power of I Am was undeniable. He let Israel go, and what followed was a miraculous deliverance remembered for generations. Moses had doubted, feared, questioned if he was the right man, but God showed he was in control. It was never about Moses' strength, it was always about God's power. That same power, the power of I Am, still works today. No force, no wealth, no kingdom can stand against him. What he declares, he fulfills. What he promises, he accomplishes. Yet Israel's journey wasn't over. They were free, but their greatest test loomed ahead. What happened next would reveal if they truly believed in the God who delivered them. The I Am didn't stop with the burning bush or Egypt's plagues. It wasn't limited to the Red Sea parting, waters stretching miles, or wilderness miracles. The same God who revealed himself to Moses later walked among his people, not as a voice in flames, but as a man, Jesus Christ. For centuries, Israel had held tight to I am as their hope and identity. They'd seen its power in their escape from Egypt, their victories over enemies, their arrival in the Promised Land, a place flowing with milk and honey, acres of abundance. But they longed for more. They yearned for the Messiah, the one who'd restore everything, who'd establish God's kingdom forever. Jesus embodied that promise. He didn't just echo I am, he claimed it. Before Abraham was, I am, he said, tying himself to the God of Moses. He wasn't a mere teacher or prophet. He was I am in flesh, walking dusty roads, offering salvation. His miracles, feeding thousands with a few loaves, calming storms, showed that same power. His words, I am the way, the truth, and the life, invited all to trust him. For your audience, maybe recalling simpler days of faith, this is the God who still delivers, still stands unshakable. God's kingdom would last forever. Then, in the quiet town of Bethlehem, I am became flesh. Jesus didn't arrive as many expected. No wealth, no luxury, no rise through religious or political ranks. Instead, he came humbly, born in a manger, raised as a carpenter's son in a simple home, maybe a few square feet of space. Yet from the start, his presence carried authority beyond human grasp. As he began his ministry, people marveled at his wisdom, his miracles, the way he spoke with divine power. But it was when he said, before Abraham was, I am, that the religious leaders couldn't ignore him. This declaration shook their beliefs to the core. They knew what he meant. He wasn't just a prophet, not just a teacher. He was claiming to be the God who spoke to Moses on Mount Horeb, eternal, with no beginning or end. The Jewish people had always held God's name as sacred, too holy to speak lightly. Yet here was Jesus taking that name upon himself. It was either the most blasphemous claim ever or the absolute truth. Jesus didn't stop there. He revealed more through statements echoing the same divine weight. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. With each, he unveiled a facet of God's character, provider, guide, protector, truth itself. Everything Israel knew about I am was now fulfilled in Christ. But just as Pharaoh resisted God's power in Egypt, the religious leaders resisted Jesus. They couldn't accept this man from Nazareth as equal to God. Like Pharaoh hardening his heart despite plagues, they refused to believe. Even as Jesus healed the sick, gave sight to the blind, raised the dead. Their rejection peaked at his trial. The high priest demanded, Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? Jesus' reply was simple, yet it carried heaven's weight. I am. The leaders tore their robes in fury, accused him of blasphemy, sentenced him to death. They thought they were stopping a false prophet, a man daring to claim God's name. They didn't grasp the full power of I am. Just as God showed his might over Pharaoh, he'd show it over death itself. Jesus was crucified, his body laid in a tomb, stone walls a few feet thick, but the grave couldn't hold him. 3 days later, he rose, proving he truly was I am. His resurrection was the ultimate sign. God's power wasn't just past glory, it was a living, present reality. It declared I am wasn't only the God of Abraham, Moses, and Israel, but the God of all who'd believe. This is the same God calling out today, the same I am who met Moses in the burning bush, led Israel from Egypt, walked as Jesus among men. He's still speaking, still calling, still revealing himself to those who seek him. Just as Moses faced a choice, so does everyone encountering I am. If this truth moves you, Maybe as you sit with memories of decades past, don't keep it quiet. Share this message with someone who needs it. The truth of I am has changed lives for generations, and it still can today. The revelation of I am isn't just for Moses, not just a power play for Pharaoh, not just divinity in Jesus. It's a name transcending time, holding meaning for past, present, future. When God told Moses, I am who I am, he revealed more than a title. He unveiled his eternal nature, his sovereignty over all, his independence from human limits. This wasn't a God crafted by hands, like Egypt's idols, pounds of stone or gold, or a false deity of other nations. This was the self-existent one, unbound by time or space, ruler of all creation. For your audience, perhaps recalling simpler days, family farms, or small-town churches, this name offers hope. It's the same I am who parted seas, fed thousands with loaves, conquered death. He's not distant history, he's here now for us. His power spans centuries, his promises endure. Whether facing life's trials or pondering what's ahead, I am remains the constant, yesterday, today, forever. This was the creator of the universe, the one who was, who is, and who will always be. But what does that mean for the future? What does I am have to do with what's ahead? The answer lies in Revelation, the Bible's final book. There, Jesus appears once more, not as the humble teacher trudging Galilee's dusty roads, but in glory, majesty, power. His eyes burn like fire, his voice thunders like rushing waters. Imagine tons of force in every syllable. And in his right hand, he grips the destiny of nations. He speaks those timeless words again, echoing through history. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, who is, who was, and who is to come, the Almighty. The same voice that spoke from the burning bush will one day call the world to judgment. The same I am who freed Israel from Egypt will return to establish his kingdom. The same God who walked as Jesus Christ among men will reign forever as the King of Kings. This changes everything. It means history isn't drifting aimlessly. The world isn't spiraling out of control. Despite wars, chaos, corruption, and the greed for money and luxury that consumes so many, folks chasing dollars and fancy homes, there's a greater reality at work. I am is still in control. The riches of this world will fade, kingdoms of men will topple, every empire built on wealth and power will crumble into dust. But I am remains. This is the ultimate promise and the ultimate warning. For those who trust in I am, there's hope, security beyond the fleeting treasures of this world, more lasting than a bank account or a big house measured in square feet. There's an unshakable foundation no amount of money, status, or earthly success can rival. Those who belong to I am will stand firm when everything else shakes. But for those who reject him, who stake their lives on riches, their own strength, the short-lived pleasures of this world, like a shiny car or a fat wallet, another reality awaits. Pharaoh thought he outranked I am. The religious leaders who crucified Jesus thought they could silence him. Rulers across centuries have tried to defy him. Yet he endures. One day, every knee will bow before him. Every voice will proclaim he alone is Lord, not just as a historical fact, not just a religious idea, but a reality no one can deny. This is where it's all heading. The same I am who spoke to Moses will speak again, and when he does, it'll be the final word. The only question is, where will you stand when that day arrives? The power of I am isn't locked in ancient history, isn't just a phrase for Moses or a title Jesus claimed. It's a living reality, a truth shaping the past, present, and future. The same God who spoke from the burning bush, who led Israel out of Egypt, who walked as Jesus, and who'll return in glory. That God speaks to you today. Everything in this world is temporary. Money, riches, luxury might offer comfort, a plush recliner or a warm meal, but they don't deliver lasting security. Pharaoh had wealth beyond imagination, palaces stacked with pounds of gold, yet it couldn't save him. The religious leaders wielded power and influence, but it couldn't shield them from the truth. Nations have risen and fallen, rulers have come and gone across miles of time, but I Am stands unshaken. So where do you place your trust? Do you build your life on things that fade, bank balances, big titles, or anchor yourself in the one who never changes? Moses felt inadequate, thought his time had passed. 40 years in the desert will do that. But God saw beyond his doubts, his failures, his weaknesses. God sees you the same way. He's not focused on your limits. He's looking at his power working through you. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That means no security exists outside him. No pile of cash, no string of successes, no human effort can replace what only I Am offers. Eternal life, unshakable peace, a purpose beyond this world's fleeting joys. Now it's your turn to respond. What's this taught you? How has this revelation shifted your view of God? Are you living in the reality of I Am, or caught up in temporary distractions, maybe the next sale or the latest gadget? I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might spark hope in someone else. If you're eager to dig deeper into God's Word, subscribe now, hit that notification bell. There's so much more to uncover, and you won't want to miss what's next. If this message resonates, maybe over your morning coffee, leave a like. It's not just a click. It's a declaration you believe in I Am's power. Before you go, watch the video on screen. It'll take you further into a truth that can transform your faith. If this has blessed you, share it with someone who needs it. I Am isn't just a phrase, it's an invitation. How will you answer?